It was incomplete. The Heart Sutra. Part 3. Author, Kufudo. Translator, Masaki Akiyama. Chapter 6. Freed from Karma and Suffering. Mumu mio yaku mumu mio jin, neishi mu oshi yaku mu roshi jin, mu kushu metsudo mu chi yaku mu toku. Finally, how to live as human beings and its methodology will be explained under the revealed view of the world. First, before that, the truth will rectify the error of early Buddhism. Following the previous chapter, no is expressed in color as only when no is used in the sense that it does not exist within an emptiness. Heart Sutra denies the whole of the representative scripture, the 12 nidanas, 12 causal chain, while designating the beginning and the ending of the scripture with no. Furthermore, it denies the whole scripture of Four Noble Truths by denying its elements, dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, marga, with no. And it asserts that there is no wisdom and no advantage in these scriptures. Heart Sutra is a thought system that preaches the new view of the world. Therefore, it denies the 12 nidanas, 12 causal chain, and the Four Noble Truths, because those scriptures neglect the world of an emptiness and preaching the cause analysis of difficult fate and analysis of suffering only via the idea of the world without imperfections. Spiritual awakening is to grasp the whole without analyzing, first to acquire the view of the world. Then, after gathering analysis of various parts and fleshing the whole picture out, then spirituality and intelligence will be integrated. If Buddha really preached the 12 nidanas, 12 causal chain, the essence of the view of the world has been completely drowned. As shown in detail later, the essential karma of the erased causation, the inherent karma of hardship and difficult destiny are powerful direction all for the great way to nirvana, returning to the emptiness derived from the view of the world. We shouldn't handle difficult destiny and suffering with lose sight of its most important viewpoint. This is a noteworthy part of the Heart Sutra that it is indispensable for the restoration of Buddhism. In other words, this, Chapter 6, clearly points out that the law of cause and effect has been walked alone in the history, then interpret difficult events by only cause and effect and seek the cause of life's suffering and fall into an analysis of suffering, is not only cannot solve suffering, it will rather increase suffering, and surely it is a mistake. 12 nidanas, 12 causal chain, neglected the world of emptiness, and only dealing with the world without imperfections, it will be a doomed circle, rather it will result in suffering people. In addition, in the Four Noble Truths as well, it also ignores the world of emptiness. It means that no matter how you analyze suffering, it will not solve difficulties, but rather a confinement of people in difficulty. Buddhists should firmly carve this in their hearts. Recharge 12 nidanas, 12 causal chain, and Four Noble Truths. Prajnaparamita and Law of Realization. By the way, here, the 12 nidanas, 12 causal chain, and the Four Noble Truths are denied, but let's rethink anew about the cause and suffering based on the view of the world from the viewpoint of Prajnaparamita. Well, Prajnaparamita is the life activities by basic three natures, and life activities that developed by color intention that led by color under the guardian of the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. Well, the intention of a person creates the environment and destiny as they want as the life activities, and as a result, Prajnaparamita will be forming the law of realization. So, better or worse, what human beings practically want will create a fate to realize it. However, it seems that nobody wishes for a destiny accompanied by suffering on purpose, but, as a result, we often seek suffering. On the other hand, sometimes you misunderstand about the not bitter event as suffering in your own way, but if you can position it under the view of the world, it will be resolved. In either case, everything is the fate of the result. What you have hoped for yourself, it becomes gradually clear that it is suffering according to that law of realization. As an example, I will explain the victim mentality as a factor to create a serious suffering, together with its solution by the law of realization. The victim mentality is a typical example that creates a fate that one will become a victim as a result. That is, when you are in victim consciousness, that posture of mind is same as I am always right, the surroundings are wrong, the victim is me. It is same as saying that always my surroundings are the perpetrators and I want to be a victim. As for the cause of defending the posture of mind on its own, there is also a calculation that it is possible for people who were themselves being victims to develop advantageously in relation to their surroundings. As a result, it is same as hoping to be a victim oneself. It was the fate that the result could be regarded as the present victim by law of realization because they have wished for it. At this time, the habit of thinking by color becomes the consciousness of the victim and it creates a primary event as victim consciousness. And at this time, it requires the sensitivity to feel this primary event as suffering. Only after having had this feeling, is it possible to capture the primary event of suffering. If you notice this suffering, your posture of your mind will be ready again and you will be able to find the way to nirvana. If you can notice the primary event of suffering as suffering and deny the event, it can be solved promptly, but many people cannot capture those events as suffering, even receiving them as comfortable, therefore it will be far from the solution at all. And, if I preach this idea in a more casual manner, if you cannot handle this primary event of suffering here, it will proceed further and become phenomena that you wished for, then finally you will become an actual victim. It is the actual condition of many people to feel that bitterness for the first time as it has advanced so far. This phenomenon, suffering, is a secondary event of suffering with destiny difficulties. In other words, if you can find suffering at the stage of the first primary event of suffering without going to secondary event of suffering, you will not actually become a victim. Well, the concept of primary event of suffering and secondary event of suffering are introduced. Since it will become extremely important later, please remember it. For that reason, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva acts for the power to create the fate that color operates on the color, makes them have the experiences repeated several times in order to avoid making them an actual victim of the secondary event of suffering. I will urge you to feel suffering by yourself at the stage of being a victim conscious of primary event of suffering. What is sought here is to discover their own victim consciousness, and it is important to become aware of suffering with the primary event of suffering. This primary event of suffering is the awareness of correct suffering as a strong direction for returning to the emptiness that will be explained later. If you can grow and realize this correct suffering, the fate will change drastically and will go up to the next step. And unfortunately, if you cannot feel correct suffering right here, eventually law of realization will make a phenomenon of the secondary event of suffering that makes one become a victim, and the difficult fate will be realized. And, as a matter of fact, there are a lot of primary events of suffering besides the victim consciousness, and they are acting in a complex manner to create the secondary event of suffering. Well, here, I will present an important view of Chapter 6, which is denied the 12 Nidanas, 12 causal chain, and the 4 noble truths. Multiple primary event of suffering phenomenon acts for secondary event of suffering with complex manner, but it is extremely difficult to identify the primal event of suffering from the result of secondary event of suffering. If you go forward with the analysis to try to know that, you will fall into a negative spiral and you will suffer without a conclusion. This chapter is preaching that such circumstances should be avoided. When you experience the secondary events of suffering, you are in a state of fractal resonance among the multilayered structures of consciousness, so that you can find the cause somewhere in the mind. It resonates with its cause in the memory of long-time experience, and at least it's a weak reflection to yourself. Of course, even if you come to this point, if you have realized that the primary event of suffering was a necessary suffering for you, still, it is enough to catch for returning to the emptiness. Suffering has a positive meaning. People can understand how to move and able to fix it by looking at their suffering properly, correctly experience the suffering, and by immediately noticing the occurrence of the primary event of suffering. However, as a matter of fact, even if it is a secondary event, if there is no danger of entering into a negative spiral when it is natural to know the cause, and if it is not an insane reason, I think that you can accept it. And, of course, it is basic to accept any kind of suffering positively why they have appeared, as the five aggregates are emptiness. It is enough if you can immediately discover the primary event of suffering and can understand the direction of how to return to the emptiness from there and affirm it in the world of five aggregates are emptiness. In other words, if you can affirm and understand the suffering in the state of five aggregates are emptiness, you can approach the path of returning to the emptiness. Thus, suffering in faith has a very positive meaning. In other words, that is the state of five aggregates are emptiness. This is an interpretation by Prajnaparamita. There is the guidance of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva there. This is important, so I will describe it again later. By the way, in times when Buddhism was greatly confused, everyone was unable to understand fate and the essence of suffering accompanying it. To preach karma within that was contrary to the gist of Buddha. The interpretation of doomed and painful fate bound to the connection was born, and the spiral of suffering caused by the karma that arose, and rather, it had increased the suffering. Then, this, Chapter 6, and the following chapters were preached to liberate people from the restraint of the connection, and to show a new interpretation of Prajnaparamita. Incidentally, this problem is by no means limited to early Buddhism of this age. Even in other religions in the world, various relationships between a difficult event and the causes, results of suffering, about good and evil, and about the cause of suffering of life are variously explained. As shown here, the fundamental solution will be obtained for the religious restoration of the world by returning to the Prajnaparamita in Chapter 6, interpreting it universally, and discovering the way of return to emptiness. All of this can be solved in Chapter 6, including the theory of original sin that corresponds to the confrontation between God and Satan, and the theory of cause and events that are preached as a conflict between good and evil, and the cause of suffering, an analysis of it. In other words, all can be solved by understanding Prajnaparamita, by discovering the way to return to the emptiness, by knowing the proper way to catch the suffering that guided from the law of realization. In the development of life activities, difficult fate, karma, original sin, demon, and suffering were born from the place where color, VSSV, are fractally combined with color, VSSV. Prajnaparamita means reinterpret them from the position of true nature, and then return to the position of reality and interpret it again. It is something I want to confirm again and again, but human beings are not beings that are not enlightened or saved from the beginning. If we talk in the state of the position of true nature, their existences who are already saved and enlightened. However, in terms of the position of reality of the human being who is living in this world of five aggregates, we have confirmed every event one by one, and finally, it reached a state of all affirmation. All the talk of karma and suffering is an interpretation that necessary step when you are climbing step by step toward this position of true nature of the stairs of position of reality. As Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva says from the deep meditation of Prajnaparamita, if we interpret it from the position of true nature, all phenomena and events exist as five aggregates are emptiness, and any difficult event, any suffering, any sin are all affirmed as five aggregates are emptiness. It is impossible to affirm all for a human being who live in the real world, but even if you can understand the five aggregates are emptiness as the position of true nature, the burden of feeling becomes extremely light. In other words, usually you can interpret it from the position of reality, but if it's a serious difficulty or an event with a great suffering, once you judge from the position of true nature by interpreting it back to, then you can essentially get a solution. Let me give an example. For example, I heard that disabled people have a feeling of being discriminated against being classified as handicapped and healthy persons. Even I heard that this obstacle is one of individuality from disabled people's side. Here you can interpret from the position of true nature and you can feel strong desire to want to positively affirm their position. If you can affirm yourself, even if it sounds a bit frustrating, it is a view from the position of true nature that arrived from tough circumstances. I think it is a wonderful thing. However, it is impossible for all healthy people to seek like their views. Therefore, after this view of all affirmative position of true nature, then come down to the position of reality and accept the reality even if you classify it as handicapped and healthy in the world without countering it. I think that it is good. In the lifetime, there are often things that you must solve by going back to the position of true nature in this way. Life activities and awareness of correct suffering. When people are panting for suffering, if they were further chased by preaching its karma, it is absolutely not the gist of Buddha who has likely preached the karma. You should interpret Chapter 6 as thoroughly denying this bitter spiral. People create the world through intention and thought. On the other hand, the law of realization was guided from the fractal resonance that causes of life activities, and from there, the law of the cause and result of fate comes out. However, the law is completely under the control of the guardian spirit, and it is actualized at the most appropriate timing. Therefore, the suffering experienced in it cannot be a coincidence. You can position suffering correctly, correct the habit of thought, and aiming at the direction of fate to move on with confidence. The guardian spirit is asking you from here to discover the way of returning to the emptiness. Events created by a human who is far from awakening is an illusion because they are not Avalokiteshvara but a sattva. The suffering sense in the event is also an illusion. I will call it the illusion of suffering. This illusion of suffering is classified as the secondary event of suffering. And, as I will talk about later, the suffering that you feel in the process of practice towards the awakening is the pain that you need when you return to the emptiness, and we can call it the correct suffering. This correct suffering has already been classified as a primary event of suffering. So, switching over the secondary event of suffering to this correct suffering is the way to return to the emptiness, which will be detailed from now. Well, it is about, there is also no wisdom, no gain. These scriptures are ignoring an emptiness and are overwhelmed by the analysis for the whole period, so they hide the whole picture and they are in the world of solitary illusion that's separated from the prana-paramita. In other words, the events arising from the interpretation of these scriptures are an isolated event in the outside emptiness, and it is not in the state of fractal resonance. Therefore, they are the existence of non-existent, which should be nothing, and are an illusion. All the events made by that illusion should be denied. Therefore, the compiler of the Heart Sutra has asserted that there is no wisdom, and nothing can be obtained from here. Here, if the author supplements it somewhat, if judging from the gist of the Heart Sutra, if we can connect these karma, causation and analysis of suffering well to the way of returning to the emptiness, the fractal resonance will recover, and the original purpose of the scripture will revive. The logical and analytical are completely different. The author thinks that there is another reason why the Heart Sutra denies the 12 nidanas, 12 causal chain, and the Four Noble Truth. As an idea of an author who studied natural science, I will show it below. These two scriptures are devoted to analysis, and there is a big problem where the whole is invisible. If the purpose of the scripture is to be awakened and saved, the more analytical it is, the more the person loses the sight of the whole picture, the one that gets caught by the branches and leaves. You shouldn't enter a detailed analysis and make a mistake to lose sight of the whole by trying to be logical. If you go into detailed analysis without understanding the whole, the direction will be divergent, and you will lose sight of where you go. And indeed, 12 nidanas, 12 causal chain, and the Four Noble Truth have entered the maze like that. If you preach the way for the purpose of awakening and saving, rather than showing off analytical skills and knowledge, it is important first to handle it globally, integrally. For awakening and salvation, it is necessary to show the whole picture of the universe more than anything, and it is very advantageous to be logical in order to do so. Therefore, without entering the detailed analysis, without showing the whole picture, the future direction becomes invisible, the conclusion diverges, and it will become extremely dangerous. In order to preach the whole picture of the universe, minimum phrases are necessary, so if an analysis is necessary to define the minimum required phrase, it should be done so far. Heart Sutra is a very excellent scripture in that sense. In terms of showing the whole picture of the universe by sending a minimum phrase, it can be said that there is no other scripture beyond this. After all, the author will also analyze a part of it after all, but we try to limit analysis for analysis to the extent necessary to the minimum as much as possible, avoiding analysis for analysis as much as possible. The analysis is the only analysis of part. No matter how much you gather, there is no guarantee and it will never be the whole. Some of the analyses you must make contain definitive content that overturns the whole picture. On the other hand, natural science is learning that depends on analysis thoroughly, but in the natural sciences, every time a new part of the analysis is found, and dent and drop of the whole picture is often happening. If we try to tell the whole picture from the analysis of the parts like the modern natural science, it is required the condition that there is no leak in the classified part and that the results of the part analysis are all must be correct. Actually, it is impossible. First, the purpose of the scripture is to show the whole picture and to preach the methodology of salvation from there. Even if only the analysis is shown, no one can be saved, nor awakening be obtained. As a position of true nature, if the person was shown the whole picture that the human beings are already saved and already awakened, and if he can position himself in that picture correctly, he realizes his awakening and becomes relieved and feels saved, because he is able to see the whole picture. As a result, inside of himself, it was proved that the overall picture was correct. No matter how much of the part you can see and increase the knowledge by that, it is neither enlightenment nor to be saved. Therefore, the most important thing to preach in the way is to show the big picture, showing the whole picture. If you enter into the details without seeing a whole picture, you will definitely get lost. Or it makes people stray. I am sorry to say that Buddhism has a lot of such scriptures that analyze this pretty much. And Buddhist commentaries are all over with such analysis, all of them cannot see the whole picture at all. Of course, Buddha is not supposed to preach such a thing. That is why Heart Sutra is denying those scriptures that are full of analysis. Here, there is also no wisdom, no gain, means the author seems that the compiler of the Heart Sutra was lamenting for the denial that is the same as the author's lament shown here. Affirmation after denial. In the previous chapter of Chapter 5 and in Chapter 6, denied with no from the standpoint of emptiness, is the content of isolated early Buddhist world. However, we will reposition the isolated early Buddhist world as part of the fractal structure of the universe by denying them with no. So, for the first time, the world of early Buddhism will be reincarnated. 5 aggregate will be affirmed as part of the whole of fractal structure, as Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva is inspected in the deep meditation of Prajnaparamita. In other words, Prajnaparamita is a teaching that takes 5 aggregate as part of the fractal structure of the universe and makes it all affirm. And after all the affirmation, the fractal resonance will be recovered, and the 12 nidanas, 12 causal chain, and the 4 nobile truths will be repreached by Prajnaparamita, and it will be affirmed. And the process of making all affirmations after denial is the representative training of Prajnaparamita, which is shown below as self-enlightenment training. The stage before starting this training, people are living in such a place that how people can be so arrogant and misunderstand the position with a big face. And a lot of people are still at this stage. That is why people are lost, hence those people must be saved. As long as you are a human being, you must prepare that this exception is by no means the case. Even if you say I have meditated, prayed and trained, it cannot be relied on. And even if you have spiritual power or you can predict the future and see the past, if you do not fulfill this self-enlightenment training, your soul is flying somewhere and without noticing the gap at all. The teaching of 5 aggregate are emptiness that replacing the 12 nidanas, 12 causal chain, and the 4 noble truths. Examine the 5 aggregate are emptiness when the phrases are complete. color, VSSV are already redefined in Chapter 3. Emptiness is defined by Chapter 4. Color, VSSV are positioned in Chapter 5. By the way, the meaning of 5 aggregate in early Buddhism was the world. Therefore, we have already shown that it is a phrase that represents the unemptiness side within the relationship between inemptiness and outside emptiness, which constitutes the fractal structure. Again, the whole universe, including real and non-existent, consists of an inemptiness and outside emptiness, and it is in fractal resonance state with each other. So, it was expressed as outside emptiness as formalized emptiness. In other words, you can project the state in which the inemptiness and outside emptiness are fractal coupled as the form of truth toward your conscious world. It is just you can positively affirm the event and project it to the consciousness world without deny the event. If you understand that inemptiness and outside emptiness are fractal resonance state, it means that all 5 aggregate are emptiness. Tripitaka Master Xuanzang clarifies the fractal structure of the universe by expressing that all 5 aggregates are emptiness, understanding that 5 aggregates are inherently in fractal resonance that completely denied the nihilistic thought that prevailed in early Buddhism. All 5 aggregates are emptiness means 5 aggregates are in the fractal resonance state. When Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva sees the world after go through the world of illusion and reach the world of truth by the deep meditation of the Prajnaparamita, he preaches that inemptiness and outside emptiness are in a relationship of fractal resonance, the 5 aggregates as outside emptiness which is under the control of the inemptiness, therefore you do not need to worry. And this state of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva was called that 5 aggregates are emptiness. Well, the events that have been talked about in the early Buddhism are only the existence of the world of impermanence, that outside emptiness. Even if we cut off the outside emptiness and observe it in detail, it is not formalized emptiness, and not even emptiness. The 5 aggregates are formalized emptiness only when it is considered that the outside emptiness is a fractal coupled with the inemptiness, as the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva has seen by the deep practice of a Prajnaparamita. Heart Sutra is the phenomenon itself that Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva acquired, and it can be said that it is the deepest fractal resonance in the history of mankind. By aligning ourselves with this phenomenon, we human being can return to the emptiness following the way pointed out by Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. This truth is a truth that can be adapted to every religion in the world. Fractal resonance penetrates the universe. In addition to this, fractal resonance exists in 3 basic natures, penetrating through the inemptiness and outside emptiness. If we observe it from the real world, it is not only beyond the spatial distance, but also beyond the time axis. Fractal resonance occurs between the past and the future. That means we are now live in the present, but also live in both the past and the future simultaneously. In the future, we create several important phenomena and events and resonate fractally with the present. In other words, it became clear that phenomena and events existed in the fractal resonance among the past, present, and future. To explain this more concretely, what I'm about to decide now means that I am trying to select one of several phenomena and events leading from the past to the future through now. For the selection of an appropriate fate in the scene, the logic of Jinan that will be explained later is important. There's also a future event that was born as a destiny to become the core of fate, but we are just creating several important phenomena and events of the future right now. By the way, past phenomenon cannot be changed, but past events can be changed immediately from now. So, looking back on the past from now on, and, for example, take out events that have serious adverse effects on fate like victim consciousness, try to interpret them with all affirmation as 5 aggregates are emptiness. By doing so, events in the past will be refined and reflected in future events. However, in order to purify the past events, it is necessary to purify it partly through the body by make it as phenomena, but if you try it yourself by self-enlightenment training, that is a minimum burden. Here, we call these phenomena and purify process as vector sublimation. We have already discussed about primary events of suffering and secondary events of suffering, but the 5 aggregates are emptiness is applicable to both as it is. So, clean up the past and arrange the conditions to fractal resonance, you can create a more advanced event in the future. Therefore, it is necessary to have a meditation and practice of prana-paramita, and it can be said that universal prayer that fractal resonates with view of the world is necessary. You will be saved when you have attained the state of 5 aggregates are emptiness. In the stage of not attained to the state of 5 aggregates are emptiness, we cannot affirm even if we pick up some fragments of phenomena and events. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva is all affirming including past, present, and future. We human beings cannot evaluate events including the future. Humans who do not know the future can make all the affirmation for the first time. When they devote to Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, all the events will be affirmed including the phenomena and events in the future. Devotion is the same thing as sticking to the position to be made alive. On the premise of all affirmed phenomena and events in the future, we need to accept present phenomena and events affirmatively as their process. Correctly, you will receive the events affirmatively through past, present, and future. To make good use of this meaning over and over. Therefore, position the phenomena and event properly in the view of the world, and capture it as the 5 aggregates are emptiness in the practice of prana-paramita. It is a training that leading to all affirmations for the phenomena and event. So, we will enter into the practice of training which affirms appearing phenomena and events as inevitable. Well, as a matter of course, reflections on wrong words and behavior in daily life is a common sense that must be before training. Therefore it is not mentioned in this book. In this case, training is a task of getting out of the good or bad of such behavioral acts, capturing your own thoughts at the stage of thoughts, which is the source of words and behavior, and correctly positioning them. Without this training, there is no positive affirmation. In other words, there is no awakening or enlightenment there. In this book, we use the phrase awakening in the same sense as enlightenment. Therefore, the author decided to describe in detail the process of a series of training to the awakening from his own experience. I'll gradually describe it in detail as a Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training. And this Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training was that the author was guided by the guardian spirit, and it was the training itself to lead to awakening. And, without this, it is obvious that no one will ever come awakening. By preaching Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training, Heart Sutra will be further deepened. Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training is to reveal one's identity. There are many similar Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training and fragment of Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training in the world, but it is clearly different from them. First and foremost, Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training is based on the view of the world. It is the way to returning to the emptiness, and it's a clear signpost as to be shown in all affirmation. Already the structure of the human and the universe consists of color, and color has become clear. Although it is a reality of human being who always toss by the color that comes from animal nature, but definitely color's freedom from the emptiness moves this reality of human being from the bottom of the heart with a strong force and urges the return to the emptiness strongly. It is the power to live, the power to fulfill life activities. And that is the fundamental desire of human beings. It is the development of freedom of color. The fundamental desire that comes from the freedom of this color is the power of life that everyone has, and if it is not disturbed by color, it will rise naturally. In order to get rid of that disturbance, training of the unconscious world is necessary. It becomes a Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training as it is. Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training also to remove the opaque mist obscured by color and listen to the strong call from color. Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training is to find out the identity of the underlying desire that comes from the bottom of your heart. It is not to decide right and wrong. If you fall into the world of right and wrong, eventually you will run from the training, and Jimmy Igyo/self-enlightenment training will be collapsed. Dreamy Ego/self-enlightenment training is to discover and detach the various intense thoughts of color origin which are contrary to the fundamental desire derived from color. If you can confirm the original point, that of being alive, the fundamental desire of color will be clearly visible. And then it will eventually become a power to live with explosive power from the bottom of the heart. As good or bad, if you desperately try to know your true identity, you will eventually reach your own intense fundamental desire, and will able to live according to its power and wake up to return to the emptiness. Eventually, life activities will be fulfilled. When you discover this intense fundamental desire in your own posture of mind, it will be a great joy of living, and you will reach the emptiness in the joy of living naturally. Even if you don't do anything, life activities can be fulfilled. If you can reach there, already Dreamy Ego/self-enlightenment training is no longer necessary because it is already integrated with the intention of color. In order to reach there, the Dreamy Ego/self-enlightenment training begins by staring thoroughly with your own posture of mind. It started with discovering the source of black clouds derived from color, that covering the freedom of color, and eliminate it. Various methods are prepared to notice the black cloud. By confirming that black cloud with Dreamy Ego/self-enlightenment training and eliminating it, then you will reach the state of 5 aggregates or emptiness. But as a realistic practice method, I recommend you to take a one step back and capture this black cloud once, and putting in a process of being forgiven by the guardian spirit with an attitude of apology. Then you can naturally reach the state of 5 aggregates or emptiness. In some cases, like the former, it is possible to eliminate the black clouds at once, but like the latter, after taking the process of being forgiven on your own thoughts and actions, and attain the state of 5 aggregates or emptiness. It is reasonable to reach an understanding of all, and reasonable to reach all affirmations. This will be taken up again later. As Dreamy Ego/self-enlightenment training become available, thoughts will become objective. If you can see your own posture of mind, you will be able to better control yourself by improving your interior view. By reaching this point, you will be able to enjoy awareness of correct suffering depending on the interior view. However, to say so, it is not so easy to reach the fundamental problems which hurt yourself and binding your destiny. There is one yourself that you are trying to never see. But it is not difficult to see it. You just do not want to see it. Things you don't want to see, you will never see forever. Focus on the posture of mind. In the Heart Sutra, you will step one by one to be awakened. Heart Sutra preaches first, by placing posture of mind as a posture of devotion, it leads to the freedom of color and leads to fractal resonance, then attains toward all 5 aggregates or emptiness, then all affirmations are fulfilled and will be saved. The attitude of devotion is also an appreciation attitude. And gratitude has the same meaning as all affirmations. So, even if you face difficulty in your fate, if you can keep appreciation attitude, you can say that you already have attained the state of 5 aggregate or emptiness. Well, here, training is never just prepare words. Of course, it is effective enough to prepare words as an entrance of devotion. But overshoot is prohibited. The biggest task to the last is to look at posture of the mind rather than the words good or bad. You should not misunderstand the positioning of words. Never, what you can do with words, cannot really be done. Words and behavior are always in the form of a surface layer, and it is the original appearance that by arranging posture of mind beforehand, and the words and behavior will be prepared. However, because words have power, it is effective sufficiently to express the words based on the view of the world. And a dirty word will pollute the surroundings and make your heart dirty. Many people think that training is to prepare words and behavior, but this is an early stage of training, and it will never be training for a person who is aiming for the spiritual awakening. Verbal behavior is important to make easier for human relations, but that is not the original purpose of the training. Training that devoted to preparing words is not appropriate. It is because you won't understand your true feelings. If you are talking in a natural way and find the victim's words you spoke, it is a big discovery and you have noticed it because you spoke it. It should be a great deal of joy, because it will not notice if you always try to prepare the words. Who forgive others? Of course, if you hurt a person with words, it is natural that you must apologize it, do, clean up and defile the place, wiping out until you are satisfied with yourself. Of course, there is a danger that the lie of self-justification might get in, so a gentle apology is required while Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva is placed in your heart and not make any excuses. It becomes paradoxical, but what you need here is to convince yourself and not the convincing of another person. If you wait for the other's satisfaction, it will not be cut anywhere you go, and finally you will drive the person into victim consciousness. In this regard, I think that there are many people wonder about this point, so let me explain a little more. Below, let's exchange the position of the opponent to your position and consider both sides as possible from the view of both sides. In other words, let's think about how you accept the opponent's apology here, assuming that the hurting side is your opponent and the hurt side is yourself. Usually, as it is for yourself to forgive others, you think that the person should apologize until you are satisfied. However, in reality, this is the victim consciousness that hardly to notice. If you fall this pit, it is quite difficult to get out. No matter how irrational it was toward the others, everything was all in five aggregates or emptiness. This is the origin of the position of true nature. In other words, this is an important experience that Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva has given us. So, if you are at the position of true nature, it is right to accept this as it is affirmatively and receive with gratitude. But in reality, opponents should apologize to you as common sense. However, we must not forget that there is a view of the world of five aggregate or emptiness behind it. So, in this case, the opponent's apology is for your color, not for the color. And even here, forgive the opponent's apology is your color, not a color. To put it more clearly, this color does not even qualify to forgive others. So originally, I do not even have the qualification to forgive others. Or if you can think that I do not even have the qualification to blame others or even let others apologize for myself, you will be able to put yourself calmly in the state of five aggregate or emptiness all the time. Live with the state of everything as necessary experiences. Dreamy ego/self-enlightenment training is not to decide right and wrong, good or bad. In that sense, it is different from so-called reflection. Dreamy ego/self-enlightenment training is a training that pleases the discovery of posture of the mind that is shielding the freedom of color. And you should use those negative words and behaviors come out from yourself to discover your true identity. In this example, the fact that posture of the mind that filled with victim consciousness is a complete denial of the state of five aggregates, it is a totally opposite mental attitude for the five aggregate or emptiness. If you leave it, you will never reach the state of five aggregate or emptiness. Let's thank the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva who taught you about it greatly when you found such a big black cloud. In addition, the term training as used here does not imply that it places a heavy burden on the body, and it does not endure it. There is nothing to do with any strong physical training or harsh perseverance at all. It is no relationship with the prajna paramita. If there is no establishment the position, friction will occur. Even some religions other than Buddhism, which does not preach the karma, seen as being played by humans in this whirl of good and evil conflicts, or being in the tug of war between God and the devil. As both karma and original sin are illusions, the contact between good and evil here is also surely an illusion. There is a mixture of deepening phenomenon and deepening delayed phenomenon. Furthermore, there is a mixture of the relationship between individuality and individuality with different roles. When these phenomenon and individuality are directly in contact with each other, each of them required the establishment the position. If there is no establishment the position, a conflict will occur, and it seems that both are conflicting. In other words, establishing a position is not equal but is aware of themselves in equality each other. The universe dislikes uniformity. So, Heterogeneity means inequality, which makes sense for the universe. It is not contrary to the theory of the universe to treat only certain conditions uniformly, that is, equality, as love as an institution among its inhomogeneity. However, if you ignore the essentially unequal unevenness of the universe, there will be impossible, and conflict will occur. The conflict that due to the friction is a process of life activities from the standpoint of position of true nature, and it is a conflict of good and evil from the position of reality, and it is an event should be solved. So, why is the principle of inequality established in the relationship between human beings and human beings? Humans are made up of a fractal combination of color and color. Therefore, principle of equality is established in color of a human being, but principle of equality is depending on the degree of awakening of color, or the degree of dominance of color. Therefore, human beings must constantly be aware of the two principles that are contradictory to each other to this phase and must be used it properly. In this regard, we will discuss somewhat with the chapter of completion I added at the end. Have Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva forgive the gap between the position of true nature and the position of reality. From the view of the position of true nature, as the state of five aggregate are emptiness. Humans are all affirmed from the beginning, also all is forgiven. So, knowing that, posture of mind must affirm everything and must be satisfied always with gratitude. However, there is no person who can do so as they say. On the other hand, it is somewhat difficult. Logic development is necessary to affirm yourself from the position of true nature so as not to become hypocritical when make a mistake. It can be a quibble. So, in a reality, I think once it is better to return to the position of reality while confirming the position of true nature, and then pick up the events one by one, and ask to forgive by the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. Do not forget that Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva forgives it but not you. And this is forgiveness. There is no forgiveness that in the sense of allowing it. By all means, I recommend make it customary to introduce this process. Although Heart Sutra has not touched on how to deal with daily events at all, but as long as we acquire a view of the world, we can live with deep love as a human being who lives reality under the guardian of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, and we will able to judge and act correctly. Knowing the position of inherent nature, standing in the position of reality, you will able to penetrate the integrity on the stand against various contradictions and evils occurring in real society. Also you will become possible to penetrate the attitude to pursue thoroughly if it is necessary. Cross the river of Dhamma-Ego/self-enlightenment training. There are things that the author strongly thinks after teaching a lot of people. There are too many people who do not want to discover the primary events of suffering, and rarely try to discover it by themselves. To me, it was the greatest pleasure in my life to solve the primary event of suffering by Dhamma-Ego/self-enlightenment training, which was developed by myself, but many people do not want to touch them even by the existence of their pain. In this way there is a big river between secondary event of suffering and primary event of suffering, and if it does not go beyond that, you can never reach the nirvana. You cannot be saved, nor awaken without solving the primary event of suffering. In order to solve the problem of primary event of suffering, we must first discover its existence. If you do not find it, you will end up with all the means with something like close your eyes and shaking the bat. All measures are finished with labor. As a religion, the religion trying to be saved from the secondary event of suffering without preaching the primary event of suffering, it will lack the essence. Therefore, I think there is no such thing as intrinsic salvation there. People who try to fulfill returning to the emptiness, always have a fight with primary event of suffering that I discovered. From my teaching experience, the width of the river between the two of sufferings is quite large, and the pupils will be sorted largely here. Only those who showed the will to overcome this river of Dhamma-Ego/self-enlightenment training by themselves will discover the primary event of suffering, and can go to the next stage. However, it is not impossible to cross this river of Jami-Igyo/self-enlightenment training alone like me, but it is safe and reliable to cross the already developed lines with a large ship. And we can help each other and enjoy a lot along the trip. It is important to recognize it as a fun trip. Attaining to nirvana means, this is to aim for immigration, not a travel. Beyond the river there is a place of true residence. Since it is a migration to that place, you finished organizing your affairs and take only the things you really need. How can you make easy and light is important. In other words, how much can you abandon the primary event of suffering? Then, you can cross this river of Jami-Igyo/self-enlightenment training repeatedly. It is also possible to discover a new primary event of suffering on the way and discard there. In this ferry, it is possible to discover the primary event of suffering and to solve it. It is a very crucial cruise. It is not like getting on board with a gruesome decision. In order to have a fun trip, there is a timing, and it is necessary to wait until the time comes by meditation and practice of prana-paramita. And if you are judged that the time has not come, you must realize that you are not crossing the river yet and you must live modestly. You should never think that you have already reached nirvana at this stage. So, I distinctively distinguished the primary event of suffering from secondary event of suffering. Then, I call this primary event of suffering as an awareness of correct suffering, and the Jami-Igyo/self-enlightenment training that developed by the author has starts. The author reveals the existence of this river in this book and shows the Jami-Igyo/self-enlightenment training to cross this river. Then all the practitioners of the world can now be aware of which side of this river you are on your own. If you do not practice Jami-Igyo/self-enlightenment training, you cannot cross this river. If you will not cross this river, you should be aware that there is no spiritual awakening there. In the past, since there was no clear scale to evaluate oneself, everyone ran to self-justification, overestimate themselves only with knowledge. Many of the practitioners felt, as a great person who knows everything, it is continued to issue numerous victims. Law of realization will take you to the world which you want. It will lead you according to the priority of your life. You should strive to give the highest priority to correctly position yourself within the view of the world for a while. And there is a need for a sensibility to think that it is a pleasure to discover the displacement of the position there. If you have this feeling, you will discover the displacement of the position here, cut off the temptation of self-justification, and as a result, the feedback will take effect correctly and the trajectory correction will take place naturally. And if there is no feedback, that is, if there is no Jami-Igyo/self-enlightenment training, you will draw into the world of illusion deeply, turning your back against awareness of correct suffering. Then just only having prayer alone, you can be put on a great illusion. You believe you will make it soon. You can easily become an awakening person. Maybe you can become a god in your mind. And you are not that exception. If Jami-Igyo/self-enlightenment training become a habit in the world, a lot of decent practitioners who have restrained, applied feedback, always be able to check and correct their position in the view of the world, will grow up. If so, the number of trainees who have learned about one's appropriate position will increase, and less people will talk beyond one's position. So, from now on, in this book you will discover primary event of suffering, and I will preach the Jami-Igyo/self-enlightenment training for those who want to solve it. For those who are interested only in secondary event of suffering, it might be a boring story, and some people may show strong rejection reactions. Such premature people will not recognize not only Jami-Igyo/self-enlightenment training, even the existence of that river. Nevertheless, the author preaches primary event of suffering, because it is the gist of Heart Sutra that the way toward nirvana, and there is no other way than to cross this river to reach nirvana. Define a return point. When deepening the Jami-Igyo/self-enlightenment training by seeking a solution of primary event of suffering, you will be shocked to realize how you've been living a way of life until now, and it is also the time of joy for discovering big problems of yourself. Up to now, there are times that you will be surprised how you discharged the negative side of color, and there seem to be sorry from the bottom of your heart. And that is a time to be thankful to the guardian spirit who guided you up to this point. That time is very important and means establishing your starting point in the universe for the first time by establishment the position. In other words, at this time it will switch to the return to the emptiness journey. This time is said to be returning point, and it is a memorable time for Jimi Ego/self-enlightenment training. What should I do then? Should it be better to open up and say, this is okay from the standpoint of true nature of five aggregates or emptiness? However, this seems that the gap with reality is too much, and the posture of mind is seemingly self-justified. Self-justification by using the word of truth is the most dangerous lie. So, always doubting is a normal feeling. So, at such times, you will have Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva to forgive one of your noticed faults with the awareness of correct suffering and I'm sorry for that from the position of reality. You will be forgiven only if you have the awareness of correct suffering. If you do not have that, no one can understand what you want to forgive and there is no way to forgive you. Below, I prepared a spell for that is, prayer for a return point. So let's pray it with all your heart. From my previous writing, reprint version/human radio, I was quoted here with the author's responsibility, with some modifications added. Prayer of return point. From my ignorance, arrogance, and selfishness by that, I always heard everyone pollute the surroundings. I feel very sorry to have continued inconvenience a lot and what I have lived without knowing that. Please forgive my virtue so far. And, even me like this, I sincerely thank you for all of you, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, for putting me here. I sincerely wish to be reborn as an honest and humble person now. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, I am such a person, but please keep it from now on, as you can lead me. Reference 3/reprinted version, Human Radio, Kufudo, Kanbunsha. In this way, it leads to all affirmation reasonably, step by step with the Jimi Ego/self-enlightenment training, and you will go toward the way of returning to the emptiness. And from now on as well, you will have to check the return point over and over again by Jimi Ego/self-enlightenment training. You will be released little by little from the suffering of karma and destiny, and gradually climb the stairs to the emptiness on each confirmation. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva deepens fractal resonance. Due to the characteristic of beings which do not lack nor are filled, each life activity has its own rule sharing so that it does not become uniform so as to maintain its diversity. Moreover, while keeping its independence, it is created to continue interacting with each other while maintaining some degree of independence. In this way, beings which do not lack nor are filled means inequality, and each ensures a suitable position so that never be homogenized and construct a fractal structure in a multi-layered fashion. From the view of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, fractal resonance states of various multi-level stages are always coexisting, and Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva himself is in the perfect and deepest fractal resonance state. And often, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva dares to be involved in other lower fractal layers for relief for sentient beings. Therefore, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva is never karma nor casual, and not a bipolar of good and evil. It is not in the dualistic fight between God and the devil, but it is not even a flattened all in a uniform way. Therefore, it leads sentient beings to inevitably deepen the multi-layered fractal resonance state. Karma and suffering is a matter of world religion. In order to revive Buddhism, in order to solve the karma and suffering in this chapter, knowing the existence of the position of true nature of five aggregates or emptiness, realistically capturing it in the position of reality, are necessary process to reach return point reasonably and climb all the way to affirmation from there. And likewise, observing the religions of the world, there are not a few that correspond to Buddhism's karma and suffering, and there is also no similar affirmative process, therefore various contradictions and conflicts exist. It is the same as Buddhism, because there is no position of true nature, because position of reality is not linked to the position of true nature. Therefore, in order to rebuild the world religion, incorporate self-enlightenment training, partly adding the present position of reality to avoid contradiction as an appearance premise. The position of true nature of five aggregates are emptiness. The author believes that the religion of the world can be regenerated. Knowing this so far, I think you will understand that how Tripitaka Master Ksenzen was great because he made two categories as position of true nature and position of reality and connected them again. This is a proper use of the position which made it possible only by severe self-observation and the practice of deep prajna paramita. In the first place, the position of reality is a staircase leading to the position of true nature. It is a means, so if you preach only the position of reality as it was in the past, even if you do not notice the contradiction alone in that religion, there will always occur different interpretation with other religions. And if we make the position of true nature clear here, since all religions are the same and the state of five aggregates are emptiness, in this point, every religion in the world can understand each other, so that universality can be restored by that. Indeed, Chapter 6 is preaching so far. In Chapter 6, I have shown the position of reality as a staircase leading to the position of true nature, and by using them properly, we have crossed over a large wall that we could not overcome. However, if you lose sight of this distinctive composition and treat both in the two-dimensional manner as equal, one side you are affirming in the position of true nature, on the other hand criticizing and denying in the position of reality, therefore it will be contradictory in terms of expression. You will describe it as perfect in the position of true nature and also describe it as imperfect in the position of reality. People who cannot understand the meaning of this distinctive meaning and cannot understand the construction of logic, they can only understand the surface, and there seems to be contradiction and confusion occurs. What I am talking about here is quite sophisticated, and I think that some people cannot follow it. If you cannot understand this extremely important usage, you will only be given some confusion, so in that case, I recommend you take a day off and read back again from the beginning. Or, for a few years, leaving from this book, until the appropriate time comes while making a custom to recite the Heart Sutra updated version with beings which do not lack nor are filled, or make a habit of chanting the prayer to emit fractal resonance. I recommend you send your daily life for a while now with honesty to yourself. The following will continue to describe only those who can understand this distinction.